From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Walking the walk.
I became a passionate advocate, and we went to 100% adoption of cover crops that fall.
Meet an Iowa farmer who takes conservation to a whole new level. The fight for fertilizer.
There has been a cessation in the flow of fertilizers out of the Baltic and the Black Sea in particular.
The latest on efforts to grow production here at home, as a new spring outlook paints a bleak picture when it comes to drought.
The wheat pasture generally is not in very good shape.
And the winter wheat crop hangs in the balance right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The drought that has continued to plague much of the country this past year is expected to continue, especially into the west this spring. That's the assessment of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which has just released its spring outlook. Now, this map shows where forecasters say there is a greater than 50% chance of drought. The area in brown where drought will continue or worsen this spring. The areas in yellow where it could develop. Now, forecasters also calling for above average temperatures for most of the U.S. from the desert southwest to the east coast and north through the Midwest to the Canadian border, with the greatest chances in the southern Rockies and southern plains. They're also calling for above average rainfall for portions of the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and Mid-Atlantic. Now, this outlook coming as we get a current look at the drought conditions. A new drought monitor showing 60% of the country is in some sort of drought right now. The drought continuing to put pressure on the nation's winter wheat crop. The top U.S. wheat producing state, Kansas, hasn't received much measurable rain or snow since October. Right now, 75% of the state is dealing with drought, with more than half of the state experiencing severe drought. Severe drought is also covering large portions of Oklahoma and Texas. The extreme dryness also impacting ranchers.
There are some folks that just plan on grazing out wheat no matter what, and so they're hanging on right now because, again, the wheat pasture generally is not in very good shape. They're hoping to get some rain for that graze out. Now, that said, obviously, with what's happened in grain markets the last few days, there may be some of these guys, if they're not quite at the point of first hollow stem, that may be second-guessing the idea of getting those cattle off of there and seeing if they can actually make some wheat and take advantage of this market situation.
A cut in wheat production could further cause food inflation around the world, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine is continuing to stoke those fears. The World Bank now warning a number of developing countries face near-term wheat supply shortages. Those countries depending on Ukrainian wheat exports, which have been disrupted since the war broke out. The World Bank saying that countries like Gambia, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Pakistan are most exposed. It also says Russia has implemented a new restrictive quota on exports of wheat and other cereals to certain countries, further disrupting supplies of the key staple. In Ukraine, officials say the winter grains are in good condition. The country's deputy ag minister saying that despite the difficulties, quote, Ukraine will have bread, end quote. But he concedes the export potential is significantly undermined by the war, which will lead to higher prices. Reuters is reporting the area used for planting spring crops in the country could fall by 39%. Now, it's estimated nearly 5 million acres of winter wheat, barley, and rye grown this year could be damaged or unavailable for harvest due to the war. You'll remember earlier this week we reported Ukraine's president had urged farmers to plant as many fields as possible. And Russia's war with Ukraine will be a top subject when President Biden talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping today. The White House saying the conversation is part of, quote, ongoing efforts to maintain open lines of communication between the U.S. and the People's Republic of China. President Biden and Xi last spoke in November, holding a virtual summit. Also impacted by the war in Ukraine, fertilizer. Russia is a top 5 supplier of fertilizer to the international market, including the U.S. Now, USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack is underscoring the need for a self-sufficient U.S. economy that isn't reliant on foreign resources. Vilsack recently speaking at a bioeconomy conference in Washington, D.C., saying that the U.S. today is reliant, quote, on someone who feels that they can just invade another country for something that's critical to agriculture, fertilizer, end quote. He went on to say that fertilizer costs have gone up in part because of dependence on Russia.
In the North American market, we first really saw the nitrogen complex react, particularly on the urea. We have seen prices up about a fifth since then, so a decent reaction. You've seen some of the phosphate prices react as well. I think a lot of that had to do with that sense of fear of shortage in the market, which we had leading up to potentially here.
Now, Taylor says it's still too early to talk about when prices and availability may improve. He says farmers need to expect issues through 2023's planting season. Speaking of available supplies, Nutrien says it will ramp up production of potash for later this year. The company says it plans to increase production to 15 million tons, nearly 1 million tons more. In a release, Nutrien says it's responding to this period of unprecedented market uncertainty by safely expanding potash production. Now, compared to 2020, the company says that potash production will be nearly 20% higher, accounting for more than 70% of newly added production during that time. Severe weather season is upon us, and meteorologist Andrew Whitmire is here. Andrew, we're talking about several rounds of severe weather for the Deep South.
Yeah, that's right. As we take a look at the map behind me, we do have to watch out for a few strong to severe thunderstorms to develop today. It's all thanks to the strong low pressure system that continues to work its way through the Midwestern and Great Lakes states, and that's going to spawn, again, the potential for some strong to severe thunderstorms across the Tennessee, Ohio River Valley, as well as parts of the Deep South. And as we take a look at that Futurecast model here, notice that low pressure system right now down centered across Oklahoma Friday morning. That will begin to track its way towards the north and east as we go throughout the rest of this Friday and going forward into the first part of the weekend. On the northwest side of that low, we're going to have to watch out for some sloppy, wintry weather. And on the southern side of that low, we'll have to watch out for the potential, again, for a few of those strong to severe thunderstorms to impact, again, parts of the Deep South, the Tennessee, Ohio River Valley. And, of course, that will have some prolonged flooding issues, as well as some of those embedded showers and thunderstorms could be producing rainfall amounts in excess of a ½ inch or more of rainfall. And notice parts of Iowa, southern Wisconsin, where we could have a little bit of that wintry mess setting up. We could be looking at some rainfall rates in excess of 1 inch of precipitation. Look at this amazing shot captured by Ken Blackwell in northwest Arkansas. Ken said he looked up and saw an iridescent cloud for the first time. Truly spectacular. Thanks for sharing, Ken. I'll have more on your Ag Day forecast coming up.
Wheat markets are trending up again. We'll discuss the big picture and global production next. And later, no matter what he grows, this Iowa farmer has his eye on conservation and stewardship. Meet this year's winner of the ASA Conservation Legacy Awards in the country.
Ag Day is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer.
We're joined today by Steve Georgie with Allendale Incorporated. Steve, as we look at what's been going on in this wheat market, it's been really the kind of headliner here of this entire Russia-Ukraine situation. What is it telling us now? What does the future hold for this wheat market?
You know, the uncertainty is what's giving this market this up and down and these massive swings. You know, but not only that, we're watching this Ukraine situation and we're seeing talks that are getting better. So the market reacts or we see a lower move. But now we mix in, we've got some more moisture that could come into that Oklahoma, Kansas, southern areas of Nebraska. They've increased rain events over the next few weeks. And we need to watch that because we know that wheat conditions here went into dormancy at one of the lowest levels we've ever seen. And so you kind of have this fight between two different worlds right now, but we've got to be careful because as talks are getting better for Ukraine and Russia, that's negative to wheat. Moisture right now, that may be negative to wheat. And so it is something that the market plays into it, but we have to watch those two situations because as they change, the markets will move and you've got to be prepared for that.
Do we have enough global supply of wheat? I think that's a big question that the market's been trying to answer given whether or not Russia and Ukraine actually export any grain this year.
Right now we do. And I say that as of right now we do. But it is one of those, when you look at what happened last time we saw prices just skyrocket in 2008, we had global wheat supply shrink and get quite a bit tighter. We're not in that scenario just yet. Can that happen? We might be too early for that. It could happen if we start seeing problems here in the U.S., we see this issue with Russia and Ukraine continue, or even some problems with Australia. They export a lot of wheat as well. So we have to watch that, because right now it's okay. Not that it's great, but it's okay. But it's one of those that if things progress or get negative down the line, it may end up forming into this bigger problem with supply as we move through this year and maybe even into next.
Steve Georgie, Allendale Incorporated, thank you so much for being here. We'll be back when more AgDay comes.
You betcha. Thank you.
To talk to Steve Georgie one-on-one, call Allendale Incorporated at 800-262-7538 or head online to allendale-inc.com. Find farm equipment on Machinery Pete's March 22nd online auction. No reserve, no buyer fees. Start bidding now at auctions.machinerypete.com. AgDay weather is brought to you by Zoetis. Even though calves don't wait for perfect weather to arrive, you can count on Zoetis to be there. Share a picture of your newest calf and you could win a calving season survival kit. Enter now at calvingseason.com.
Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire joining us here. Take a look at our national forecast. And Andrew, it's almost spring, but that also brings with it the threat of severe weather.
It does, unfortunately, and no one really wants to hear about severe weather, but that is what's on the menu across the far deep south as we go throughout the start of next week. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, that is where we are watching again the potential for several rounds of strong to severe thunderstorms to kick off next week. And we're going to see the severe weather starting out on Monday across the eastern Texas panhandle and then eventually work its way all the way over to the Florida panhandle here by the time we get towards midweek on Wednesday. And again, we could be looking at strong to severe thunderstorms, several rounds of potentially across the deep south, something that again, we will continue to monitor as we head towards Monday, Tuesday, right on into Wednesday. As we take a look at this jet stream though, for this end of this week here, we've got this cutoff low that's going to continue to increase its direction towards the Great Lakes, upper Midwest, the New England states here. And then briefly Sunday, Monday, we're going to get this nice ridge pattern to build up again, bring with it more rounds of a spring to parts of the Great Lakes area. But this is the area to watch here. Notice this dip in the jet stream. This is what's going to spawn active to strong to severe thunderstorms across the deep south as we go throughout the start of this week, Monday, Tuesday, right on into Wednesday. Notice how that jet stream works its way closer towards the eastern coast here, and that's going to usher in some cooler air to the north as well. Below average temperatures likely by the end of next week for parts of the Midwest Great Lakes states. Meanwhile, out across the Pacific Northwest, a nice ridge gets building, and that's going to allow for some much milder air really to funnel in across the western coast. And as we take a look at that severe risk for today, notice where these redder shaded areas are, the Tennessee River Valley as well as parts of the deep south there. And that's where we have to watch out for a few strong to severe thunderstorms for this Friday. And this is ahead of that next system next week of Friday and into parts of next week, Monday's strong to severe thunderstorm potential. So let's break down this first round for this first half of this weekend. Friday morning, it's all thanks to this low pressure system digging out of Texas and along that cold front. That is where we have to watch out for a few stronger storms. On the north side of that, it's a wintry side with some wintry mess, and it's sandwiched in between there. We've got scattered pockets of showers, and on the back side of that low pressure system, we'll see an area of high pressure building on in slowly, and that should bring much of the lower 48 a pleasanter end to the weekend. But already our next system again developing across the Pacific Northwest with several rounds of precipitation likely across the Pacific Northwest. And hey, we've got 1 day left until spring. We just have to make it through Saturday, and then we finally get that spring equinox across the entire northern hemisphere. Let's take a closer look at select cities where you are at, and let's take a look at that. The first town, Dyersburg, Tennessee. Cloudy with showers, high temperature 68 degrees. Going over to North Dakota, mostly sunny and mild. The western half of the state getting up to around 60 degrees. And Atomic City, Idaho, sunny and mild, middle 40s.
Another federal judge is striking down one of Iowa's so-called AgDay laws. The judge saying the law is unconstitutional. Now, that judge saying in her ruling, quote, Iowa seeks to protect private property rights by singling out for punishment, at least in part, trespassers based on their disfavored viewpoint of agriculture, adding, quote, that the state of Iowa may not single out individuals for special punishment based on their critical viewpoint of agricultural practices, end quote. Now, the Iowa Capitol Dispatch says in the past 10 years, state legislators have passed 4 separate laws to try and stop activists from getting jobs at ag facilities in order to conduct undercover investigations into animal treatment. Iowa's Attorney General saying his office is reviewing the judge's decision. Montana's governor says the state will not participate in President Biden's 30 by 30 initiative. Republican Governor Greg Gianforte calling the effort, quote, long on philosophy and short on detail, end quote. The president's initiative aims to conserve 30% of America's land and waters by the year 2030. Now, the governor said the Department of Interior and the president don't have the authority to implement the plan. He also said it would impose significant harm on Montana. He concluded, quote, at a time when inflation is at a 40-year high and soaring, it is irresponsible to commit funds to advance inefficient and wasteful efforts, especially when the identified goals are already successfully met by the states and other stakeholders, end quote. Farms across the country are indeed practicing conservation and land stewardship. Up next, we'll tour a farm now considered one of the nation's best in the country when we return.
The 2022 Bracket Busters Challenge, presented by Case IH, is underway. Who's still in the game? To find out, head to AgWeb now through April 4th to check the leaderboard. The American Soybean Association's Conservation Legacy Awards are brought to you by Nutrien. Nutrien's commitment to growing the world from the ground up means taking our role in protecting the planet seriously. Nutrien, feeding the future.
All week, we've introduced you to regional winners of the American Soybean Association's Conservation Legacy Awards. Now, one of those regional recipients was ultimately named an overall national winner. In 2022, that honor goes to Wayne and Ruth Fredericks of Osage, Iowa. Wayne Fredericks calls himself the accidental conservationist. When he started farming back in 1973, he believed a fully conventional tillage operation was the only way to go. But after nearly 20 years, Mother Nature stepped in and upended those plans on his northern Iowa farm.
But 30 years ago, this particular month, we froze up and we couldn't plow our corn stalks. I said plow our corn stalks because at that time, that was part of our production system. We plowed our corn stalks and we worked our bean ground ahead of our corn and soybeans. And so that winter, I was pondering what to do, and I happened to run across an article about a young gentleman that was no-tilling soybeans in southwest Minnesota. That caught my attention. I mentioned it to my John Deere dealer, and long story short, he got a drill in that spring that we could rent and try, and it worked well. They grew well. They yielded well, they looked good, and that was important to my dad. He lived on the highway. And from that point forward, I was an instant no-tiller of soybeans.
Strip-till corn came about a decade after no-till. The technology evolved and showed promise on the 756-acre farm. Frederick says his goal became one of setting an example for other farmers by successfully showing that no-till and cover crops work, sharing information he learned, and trying to make a difference on a large scale.
It wasn't until about 2012 that we started working with cover crops, and we were doing experimental work for the Iowa Soybean Association, their on-farm network, and trying to learn what worked, when to plant, how thick to plant, how to terminate, what effect on yields and so forth. And I knew that we could reduce nitrates with cover crops, and so I became a passionate advocate, and we went to 100% adoption of cover crops that fall.
And beyond the benefit to crops, Fredericks places great importance on the bigger picture of conservancy.
We've been a good adopter of pollinator habitat and in strategically located places. In fact, this is one of those habitats that we have here. And so we've done some profitability analysis on all of our farms, and we found some of those spots that, in a corn bean rotation weren't necessarily always profitable, and if we could put them into a conservation practice such as CRP, we could achieve some benefits that, number one, improved our bottom line profitability, but number two, provided some wonderful habitat for, monarchs and other species.
Bottom line, he says he's learned that what you do on your land shouldn't just stay there.
And I've just kind of put myself out there as, walk the talk. We're going to adopt these conservation practices. We're going to learn how to make them work, and then share that information and data with fellow farmers and hope that we can create a bigger community of conservation in this part of the country.
Now, that award was presented last Friday during Commodity Classic. Congratulations. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Quentin Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
The American Soybean Association's Conservation Legacy Awards are brought to you by Nutrien. Nutrien's commitment to growing the world from the ground up means taking our role in protecting the planet seriously. Nutrien, feeding the future.